It's your weekly dose of confessions.
Hello and welcome. It's another Confessions podcast from your friends on Drive Time from Radio 2. This week's concise collection of terrible tales, count the alliteration, includes some warden woes, portrait porkies, a sibling setup, and some erogenous etchings. Very good. Here they come, and remember, who would you forgive? It's approaching 20 minutes to 6 o'clock. It's Drive Time Confession. You can send yours via the website or email confessions@bbc.co.uk. Tonight's from Susan. Susan, thank you very much indeed. Dear Father Simon and friends, it's back in 1989 and I was backpacking around Germany with a friend. Let's call him Alan because that's his name. The Berlin Wall was just about to come down. There was an air of tension and excitement all around. We were staying in youth hostels, however. They were not the liberal abodes of today. There were strict rules that you had to adhere to. We got to this place called Cell in Lower Saxony. I don't know why I gave it a Swedish accent there.
Oh, is this going to be accent-tastic again? Brilliant. Can't wait.
I don't think so. In Cell in Lower Saxony, and we're in a gorgeous hostel with a warden who perhaps moonlighted as a gatekeeper at Checkpoint Charlie. She was grim, to say the least. Think Rosa Kleber's portrayed in From Russia with Love, and you get the picture. She was dreadful. There were no such things as mixed dorms back then, and Alan and I were in the male and the female one, respectively. After a few drinks on the town, we made sure we were back by the 11 p.m. curfew. Alan went to his dorm, only to find a note written in German placed on his rucksack. He was immediately terrified, as we'd actually brought back many cans of cider and had hidden them below his bunk. Thinking they had been spotted, we assumed that we were in big trouble. He spoke no German. I understood only a few words. We had no idea what the note said, but managed to pick out the word warden. We were doomed. Thinking we had to report to her immediately, we thought we'd do the right thing, and despite the obvious language barrier, tried to talk our way out of trouble and explained that we'd no intention of consuming the aforementioned illicit beverage on the premises. There was a strict no-drinking rule. We trotted off to her office with a sense of impending homelessness for the night. There she was, polishing the hidden knives in her shoes and looking menacing. Her assistant, grim too, was staring at us. We sheepishly handed the note over and raised our eyebrows, whilst in pidgin German said,
Here we go.
Nein, sprechen Sie Deutsch. That was unfortunate.
Yeah.
As we awaited our fate, she did a very odd thing. She read the note and then smirked. She handed it to her assistant, who also smirked and then chuckled. He then pocketed it and said in English, Thank you very much. We will deal with you.
Oh, no, they didn't.
Well, it's German, speaking in English.
We will deal with you later.
When they return. Alan and I exchanged glances. Excuse me, what was the note about? Was it not for us? The assistant then translated it for us. This is going to be good. Hi, my girlfriend and I have just checked into the hostel tonight. However, we're going for a big night out on the town. We're going to be very late and have left the window ajar so that we can sneak back without that dreadful warden knowing. Please don't close the window, as whatever you do, the warden must not know. She's probably a Stasi agent and spying on all of us anyway. Right. Alan did actually hear the couple sneaking in at about 2 a.m. in the morning with much hilarity and jollification. However, we never saw them again, and breakfast that morning had 2 very empty spaces at the table. So this confession is aimed at them, whoever they may be. We're sorry we blew your cover. We realise you may never hear this message if you're still in the labour camp in Eastern Mongolia or wherever you were banished to. We didn't mean it. We would have kept your secret forever if we'd just been able to speak German. We seek forgiveness. Now, I think youth hostel confessions, backpacking confessions, Confessions from behind the Iron Curtain. Not that Lower Saxony was, but anyway, you get the drift.
Yeah, I was actually in Berlin. We went over when the Berlin Wall came down, and we stayed in a hostel very similar to that.
You were here, and then you flew over as it all happened.
Yeah,
Really?
yeah.
When-
I was a student at the time. It wasn't me, because I'm not German, and I would not have put a note on the rucksack in German. So that brings me back a bit. Anyway,
What did you get up to?
Well, we just walked through the wall, and it was very exciting.
Fantastic.
I think it's so basically the problem was that they didn't speak German, which I think we can forgive them for that, because not that many people do speak German. I think maybe the other couple could have tried, knowing that they were not German, could have tried to maybe write the note in English. I don't know, but it is pretty terrible that they blew their cover. It's a really difficult
insult
one.
the warden in the process.
Yeah, but they didn't insult the warden, and they didn't know what the note said. So I think I'm going to forgive you.
Thank you, that's very nice. Mother Superior.
Yeah, pretty much the same. I too have been to Berlin. I wasn't there at that time, but it is a great city. And there's a lot of yes, they can be quite tough, the Germans. Particularly if they're in positions of authority, they can be quite scary. So I would agree. Not obviously all Germans, but the ones.
No, well, this clearly the woman at this hostel was slightly scary.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, but it wasn't really your fault that the note wasn't in English, as Rebecca says. So I think no harm done for you. I don't think you can be blamed in any way. So as far as I'm concerned, you're completely forgiven.
I wonder if there were many East German agents operating hostels in Lower Saxony.
Bound to be loads.
Well, they were everywhere. Yeah.
Okay, Brother Matthew, did you fly over there as soon as the Berlin Wall came down?
No, I did stay in
Freiheit.
I stayed in youth hostels. I remember having to share a room with two Italian blokes who, I can snore, but these guys, unbelievable. I ended up in the bath. It was so bad. Their snoring was so bad.
Was it better in the bath?
Yeah, it was, because I had a door in between me and the snoring. I think it's pretty foolhardy to write a note in German, so in other words, the tongue of the said youth hostel person, and criticising her in those terms, and just leave it on top of the rucksack. Maybe she'll find it, maybe she won't. So nothing to forgive, frankly, in my opinion, and foolhardy on behalf of the. Were they were also German? Were they? This probably were a German. So yes, all their fault.
Yeah. Well,
all their fault for being thick. There you go.
I think that's probably fair enough. So, backpacking confessions, youth hostel confessions, and confessions from behind the Iron Curtain.
Yes, loads of those.
They'll all work. Here's tonight's confession, everybody. It comes from Jason. Thank you very much indeed for tonight's confession. Here it comes. Simon, I'm a married man with 2 beautiful children and have led a blameless and scrupulous life thus far, apart from a series of shameful acts perpetrated by my good self nearly 30 years ago, for which I seek forgiveness from you and your considerate collective. The year is 1984. I was a typical 14-year-old boy in that I was developing a very keen interest in girls. I attended an all-boys school at the time, so found myself at a distinct disadvantage when it came to the number of opportunities available for me to work my magic on any potential girlfriends. Indeed, I relied heavily on taking advantage of the fact that my 2 sisters would regularly bring back their school friends for tea, giving me a chance to at least engage in conversation with a member of the opposite sex. I didn't find this easy, however, and would often say something or do something completely idiotic in a vain attempt to impress them. A cracking example of this is when, on hearing that a quite attractive girl liked me, I kicked a packet of crisps out of her hands while she was eating them.
Well done.
They, of course, ended up all over her and all over the floor, and she never spoke to me again. Smart lad. I don't know why I did it, but I digress. One day my dad gave me a sketching pad, as he knew that I was interested in art and drawing. When I opened this pad to the first page, my eyes gazed upon the single most impressive thing I had ever seen. It was a pencil drawing of Jimi Hendrix. Now you're probably thinking, this kid is easily impressed, but I'm not exaggerating when I say that the drawing was absolutely superb, really top draw. The artist had captured this music legend's features to perfection, his expression displaying that most iconic countenance that his fans are so familiar with. The eyes alluded to the emotion and passion that this true icon of the music world carried with him. OK, says Jason, I'm no Brian Sewell, but they get the general idea. I was awestruck and wanted to know who'd drawn it, but my dad didn't know. He'd just acquired the sketching pad, along with a box full of other stuff from a friend, and he didn't know the origin of the drawing. Inspired by seeing such a skillful piece of artwork, I went about trying to replicate the drawing myself, under the notion that if that person could do it, then so could I. which is a bit stupid, really. I tried and tried for several weeks, but my arty skills were no match, and my attempts did not do the late, great Jimi Hendrix any justice at all, and I soon abandoned this project and went about my life as before. It was some time later that the aforementioned shameful acts occurred. I happened to have the Hendrix drawing in my possession when a particularly lovely friend of my sister's came for tea. She asked what it was, and I held it up and quite innocently showed her the drawing, and her eyes lit up when she saw the faultless piece of artwork, and she said, "Wow, did you do this, Jason?" Well, at that moment, the part of my brain that deals with integrity and honesty and morality and righteousness completely caved into the part of my brain that deals with impressing girls, and I found myself saying, yes, I did that. Well, to say she was impressed is an understatement. She gazed at me in a never-before-seen respect and admiration-y kind of way, and she soon became putty in my hands. I am ashamed to say I took full advantage of this golden opportunity, and before long, she became my girlfriend. Life was good, apart from having to handle the occasional request to, "Go on, do a drawing," where I'd have to come up with a feeble excuse to... I said, "I'm tired." Being arty, I like to do my artwork alone. Is that okay?
Yeah.
The one time I did try to draw my girlfriend, she ended up looking like Slash from Guns N' Roses, which isn't a good look for a girl, in my opinion. The Hendrix strategy was used on at least 3 separate occasions with 3 different girls. Each time it worked without fail. And a beautiful 14-year-old romance was up and running, by which I think he means romance for 14-year-olds rather than a romance that lasted for 14 years. For the record, I lost the Hendrix picture about a year after receiving it. Not sure how, but at least it did ensure that I couldn't continue using the Hendrix method into adolescence. I never admitted to the girls in question that it wasn't my drawing, and the guilt of this has been with me ever since. And the girl who looked like Slash married a vicar. And so I seek forgiveness mainly from the girls who were hoodwinked at my deception, but also from the unknown artist whose superlative piece of work I plagiarized for my own selfish needs. I feel that you, the collective, are the ones who can provide me with the redemption I seek, and that if you show me mercy, it will make my life wholesome once more. Sister Rebecca, what do you say to repentant
I can't
Jason?
believe, for one, that his sister didn't grass him up and say, "What are you talking about? You didn't do that." I mean, unless she was out of the room at the time, but
Probably.
she must have cottoned on to the fact at some point that all these friends of hers were only going out with him because of
Maybe she was a
this
loving
drawing.
sister and didn't want to drop him in
Maybe
yet.
she was. That's pretty incredible if that
Yes,
was the
the one and
case.
only.
It's not a very long-term strategy, but maybe he wasn't really interested in the long term because if he had
He
to
was
keep-
14. He just
Matt's
wanted
nodding.
he just
Yeah.
wanted to
Let's be
hold
honest.
hands.
Yeah, at that age.
That's true. I mean,
Any term.
he could have come with the excuse that he could only do art when he's really unhappy and on his own, and therefore, when he's with a girl like that, whichever girl he was with, he was too happy to be an artist or something. Anyway, I think probably the artist didn't know that he was being plagiarised, so no long-term harm
Yes.
done, and you are forgiven, Jason.
What do you think, Mother Superior?
Well, I don't think there's anything wrong in lying to find a romance. I've done it myself on many, many occasions.
Have you?
I've hoodwinked people, I've lied, I've said things, just to get a date, really. Well, then you'd have to.
You've
if
got
you
the
were me,
morals of a
wouldn't you?
sewer rat as well.
Absolutely. A bloke once told me he thought I was Faye Dunaway. I met him in a club, and I told him I was.
Excellent.
Yeah, so he didn't, I didn't.
We've had a few of those fake
I was
identity
much younger
ones. This
in
is
those
quite good.
days, obviously, and it did lead to a very nice, little evening. So I think I'm going to completely forgive you because there's nothing wrong with lying, and you didn't do anybody any harm.
There's nothing wrong with lying. Just make a
in
note of that.
In that situation.
Okay, in that situation. Brother Matthew, with also had the morals of a skunk.
Yeah, I do. And this is going to be a clean sweep because obviously he's going to be forgiven because, if she's going to buy the fact that he's an artist and that he's done this amazing drawing of Jimi Hendrix and in fact that it's going to keep on working, then bravo to you, sir. And we'd have all done the same. And it's even better that you managed to draw a picture of this woman and she looked like Slash. Brilliant. Well done. Definitely forgiven.
Okay, so I think we might get... I think I quite like the idea of art confessions.
Yes.
I think that'd be quite good. And just going out with other people by deception, by pretending
Yes.
you're somebody else.
Yes, indeed. And them ending up getting married to a vicar. That always works well
Yes.
as well. Yeah.
And people who look like Slash.
Yes.
Okay, so your confessions to confessions@bbc.co.uk. You can go via the website, but the people's verdict is due now. Do you forgive Jason? Tonight's confession comes from Rachel, and I appreciate this very swift email. Thank you, Rachel. Father Simon and the Holy Entourage, after hearing the Arty Confession yesterday it was about the Jimi Hendrix etching. You might remember, Matt.
Yeah, I do.
You take your eyes off the football.
No,
just for a
the
moment.
sketch. Yeah, we all remember that.
That's right, yeah. and how it was helpful for chatting up girls. Anyway, Rachel says, after hearing the Arty Confession yesterday, I thought it was about time I owned up to a terrible incident about 40 years ago. The recipient of my misdemeanour was my younger brother. We had two lovely grandmothers at that time, Posh Granny and Common Granny.
Brilliant.
A divided house. One Sunday morning at Posh Granny's house, I was becoming a little bored. My parents were discussing grown-up topics in the living room. My younger brother was only 2 years old. It was no fun forcing me to play pirates in the garden for hours and hours. One area of the house at Posh Granny's, which is the lounge with adjacent secret room with the sliding doors, was only ever used on special occasions, and I'd been forbidden to ever enter it on pain of smacking. This was 40 years ago.
Different days.
Yes.
My granny used to call it the lounge.
Oh, really?
The lounge.
Okay, I suppose that's what it was. This day, however, the grown-ups were so deep in conversation, I couldn't resist peeping to see what all the secret room was about. I carefully opened the door into the lounge. It was all clear. I then slowly pulled open the great sliding door, just enough for me to slip in and view the secret room. It was the smell that struck me first, an oily smell that was not unpleasant, but strange. I looked around to see an artist's easel, and on it was a lovely painting of a cobbled street with cottages and beautiful gardens. My dad had always told me I had a flair for art, so although being only 7 years old, I evaluated this piece very carefully. I decided that the painting just hadn't quite depicted the cobblestones on the road with the range of colours that I was used to using in my own artwork. So slowly and carefully, I added some brighter colours from the palette, some oranges, greens, blues and purples, increasing the visual interest of the piece considerably, and a rocket. A rocket.
Oh, right.
I could still hear the dull tone. Well, clearly something missing.
Yeah.
I could still hear the dull tones of the grown-ups at the front of the house and continued my skillful applications of colour. Finally, I stepped back with pride and then horror as I realised what I had done. At this point, my younger brother appeared, who I shall call Matthew. I looked at Matthew and then back at the painting. I considered the possible outcomes and decided I would help my situation. I placed the brush in little Matthew's hand and encouraged him to experiment just a little on Posh Granny's painting, helping him particularly to spread paint over my original artwork. His 2-year-old strokes of paint and broad strokes were stunning. I then held his hand and placed it in the paint and wiped his hand on his own bib in a downward motion. I led him out of the secret room and ran outside to continue my game of pirates. After about 10 minutes, I began hearing shrieking and shouting. Matthew had obviously returned to our parents with the irrefutable evidence on his bib. I was, of course, questioned about this incident, but knew nothing. I pretended to be shocked, of course, but a week of no ice cream seemed perfectly appropriate punishment as far as I was concerned. I am now, says Rachel, a head teacher of a successful primary school and feel it's about time I came clean. I was 7 years old at the time, and although I am now knocking on a bit, in her words, I feel I have a particular skill in relating to the more disruptive pupils with an eye for creativity. I hope you can find it in your hearts to forgive. See, this art thing is proving to be quite creative, I think, and quite an interesting area. Thank you, Rachel, for swiftly responding to yesterday's art-themed confession. What do you think, Sister
She
Rebecca?
was like a murderer who covers her tracks by placing the gun in somebody else's hand.
It's not quite the same as-
No, it's just
not quite the same
similar
as
kind of
murder, it's
thing.
just adding a bit of
Wiping
paint.
the fingerprints off the gun, off the weapon. I mean, really, the forethought is terrifying.
Quite clever. She's a smart woman.
I have to say, I find that a bit sinister, and also the fact that she was 7 at the time. I think she should have known better at the age of 7, actually. I mean, I've got children around that age, and I can imagine maybe a 4-year-old doing it, or a 5-year-old not knowing what they were doing by painting a grown-up's painting. But I think 7 is pushing it a
She's
little
at
bit.
Posh Granny's house.
Posh Granny's house. So I think for those 2 reasons, I'm sorry, Rachel, you're not forgiven.
I am out. Okay, what do you
See,
say?
I was
Mother?
thinking-
Bearing in mind, yesterday, Mother Superior with no moral authority, as you said, time and time
Absolutely
again.
not.
It doesn't matter if you lie.
Well, you think it's 7. I was thinking 7 is very young,
It is,
actually.
yeah.
And I've forgotten, because my son is so old now, I've forgotten what 7-year-olds are like. But I would have thought that at 7 you do have a kind of moral compass about how you behave. But on the other hand, it is very young. So the thing is, I wouldn't forgive her for messing up Posh Granny's painting, actually. That's the thing I'm a little bit cross about. And I think she probably knew that she was doing that. So on the whole, I'm not going to forgive you because I think it was a very silly thing to do.
It's not looking good for Rachel, but Brother Matthew breaks off.
This is all very CSI before its time, wasn't it?
Very,
yes,
yeah.
What I'm going to do is not enough that I'm going to have you with the paintbrush in your hand, but I'm going to smear the paint all down your front. So
it's very Dexter.
Absolutely clear. I have no problem with this because, frankly, what are little brothers for if not for getting them into trouble?
Do you have a younger brother?
Yeah, I do. Good evening, John, if you're listening. Yes, I absolutely getting your younger brother into trouble.
Did you ever get him into trouble?
Yeah, all the time. Absolutely all the time.
Did you ever fabricate evidence at Posh Granny's house?
No, I never managed to get that amount of forethought, as Rebecca put it. So, no, I am going to definitely forgive. Well done.
More art confessions, grandmotherly confessions, whether posh or common. I think they'll be fine. Getting younger brothers or older sisters...
Yeah, loads of that.
Into trouble, all very welcome. What you do is you go to the Radio 2 website.
Yeah, Radio 2.
Radio 2 website.
That's where we are.
It's the drive time pages. You can confess from there. The whole archive is there. Or you can send us an email to confessions@bbc.co.uk. However, now we expect the people's verdict. Do you forgive Rachel? I think people would be far more forgiving than you.
Yes.
I must say. Here's tonight's confession. It's 18 minutes to 6. Send yours via the website or an email. It's another Arty Confession, I have to tell you. Yes, and it's from Nicola. Thank you, Nicola, dear Father Simon and the Confessional Collective. Your confession. The young man who passed off a piece of artwork as his own in order to curry favour with members of the opposite sex brought to mind something from my own dim and distant past, which relates to the art theme. There's an awful lot of this about, I have to tell you. At the tender age of 19, says Nicola, a friend of mine introduced me to a guy who was back then a struggling artist. He was, to my young mind, the most sophisticated individual I had ever encountered. Quite unlike the boys I knew, he was erudite, unconventional, and absolutely gorgeous. As time went by, we got to know each other more, and after an invitation to his garret to see his etchings, we became a couple. I was very impressed with the work that he showed me and longed for him to do a portrait of me, which he eventually agreed to do. I sat stock still for a good hour or so while he scribbled away with his number 2 pencil, and after numerous itchy noses and tellings off, he finally showed me his masterpiece. I was very shocked to discover that the sketch resembled his ex-girlfriend quite a bit more than me, but still, being incredibly in awe of his talent, and having been brought up to be polite to my elders, I feigned enthusiasm and delight, and told him I couldn't wait to take it away and show my friends and family this wondrous likeness. In reality, I hid it in a cupboard and tried my hardest to forget it even existed. Not long after the portrait, the film Titanic was released, and I, like many teenage girls, yearned to be drawn like one of Jack's French girls. The only difference was I was going out with an actual artist, so I decided to give him another chance to prove that he was the next Edgar Degas, and the pestering ensued. I begged to pose a la Titanic, imagining the romance and intimacy. Again he agreed, and the posing commenced. I lay starkers on my bed, freezing cold and shivering, with leg cramps and dead arms, trying to look alluring and wondering how on earth goosebumps were deemed to be romantic.
Good Lord.
Indeed. Upon the unveiling, I was incensed to find that he'd made me look like a short, fat, squashy-faced woman of ill repute. I mean, I'm no oil painting, pun intended, but he surely could have left off the pot belly and lengthened my legs a little.
Oh, dear.
Good heavens. Again, being polite, I mumbled a, "Thanks, that's great," and took myself off to get dressed into the warmest woolies I could find. The sketch took its place alongside the other in the cupboard. Things weren't quite the same between us after that, and a little while later the relationship ended fairly amicably. We just weren't right for each other. It was me, not him. We could still be friends, yada, yada, yada. A few weeks after we split up, I remembered that he still had some books that I'd lent him, and anyone who knows me knows how much I love my books, him included. And so I called him to ask if I could pick them up. "Sure," he said, "and you can drop off those pictures at the same time." "Pictures? What? Oh, those pictures." I told him I prefer to keep the pictures, if that was all the same. I was, after all, the subject, and the second one was rather revealing, even if you couldn't tell it was me. He told me they belonged in his portfolio and demanded that I take them round, or he would hold my books as hostage until I did. A rather heated debate followed. Names were called, insults thrown back and forth, and I could see he wasn't backing down on this. Well, neither was I. I loved my books, and there was no way I was letting him keep them, and likewise there was no way I was letting him keep a naked drawing of me. So I had to be a little bit clever or sneaky, and I told him that, OK, fine, I would drop the pictures off in half an hour, and that he should have the books ready, and I hung up the phone. Acting quickly, I found some white A4 sheets of paper and a red permanent marker and proceeded to scrawl faces with all the artistic prowess of a 3-year-old, tongue sticking out, eyes crossed and the like. There was a couple of Picasso-type faces with eyes on chins and mouths where noses should be. I really went to town. But the pièce de résistance had to be the last one. It was my own unique interpretation of the Titanic, drawing a red stick woman lying on a rough bed-like outline. Scribbling "Gotcha" on the final sheet, I placed the artwork in a brown envelope and made my way to the rendezvous where an acrimonious exchange of property took place. I drove away with my beloved books without a backward glance, and although the phone was ringing off the hook all night, I never answered it, and still to this day don't know what he thought of my artistic endeavours. And now my tale's at an end, I find myself wondering who I sought forgiveness from in the writing of this. Surely not the artistic ex, because I still don't think he should have had the real pictures. And they weren't very good anyway. Maybe it is purely the absolution of guilt and the forgiveness of the confessional collective that I seek. Well, let's see what they make of that. They're looking puzzled and thoughtful and trying to work out what they would have done. And maybe they did do. In fact, almost certainly the Mother Superior has a tale. I remember when I was posing. Anyway, so what do we think, Sister Rebecca? What do you say to Nicola?
I can't really believe that Nicola had already tried once to have her portrait done by this boyfriend, and then agreed to, and it was disappointing, and then agreed to have it done again naked. I mean,
I think it was the Titanic.
It's the Titanic, but I mean, what did she, and also, did she expect him really to not show a true likeness of her? I mean, did she, as an artist, expect, you know, his integrity
well,
not,
it was
not
the
to
stubby
matter?
legs.
The stubby leg. I mean, was he really expecting him to produce a Kate Winslet-type portrait? However, having said that, I always think it's good to avenge yourself when relationships break up.
Really,
and there's no way...
Why would you...
There's no way that she should have given the ex-boyfriend the naked picture. So I think it was a great thing for her to do, to pretend to do the exchange, the switcheroo. And so you're forgiven, Nicola.
OK, Nicholas, that's one for you. What do you say?
Yeah, Nicola, I think you did the right thing. I really do, honestly. I mean, fancy, you know, prostrating yourself like that, putting yourself in that position of trusting somebody who you thought was your boyfriend and loves you, and allowing yourself to be drawn naked, and then for him to make you look like some grotesque Rubens woman, I think is unforgivable. Absolutely unforgivable. And then to demand them back is even worse.
I think most artists would, because if you've painted it, it's your painting. If I
Yeah.
paint you, it's still my painting, even if it's a painting of you.
Well, yes, but you can't threaten someone. You can't say, well, unless you give me
I'll
my
give you a
paintings
tenner.
back, you're not going to get your books back. I mean, you know, it's all a bit childish and silly. So, yeah, no, I think you did the right thing, Nicola. I think I would have done a very similar thing. And, yes, a lot of my relationships have ended badly, and revenge has been very sweet.
Indeed. Brother Matt, bet you've posed a couple of times.
Obviously, yeah, all the time. I think she was definitely wanting to look like Kate Winslet out of Titanic, and was really upset when it turned out she wasn't looking like that, and so thought, well, frankly, this is going nowhere. I'm only going out with you in your garret and your etchings because I thought I was going to be the new Mona Lisa. Well, it turns out you're not. You're not an oil painting, but well done for coming up with this amazing ruse of how to get your books back and not give him the paintings. So I am going to forgive just because of that ruse. It was well worked out. But you're not an oil painting.
No, that's clearly... I think plenty more art confessions. That'd be very nice indeed. Portraits, artistic boyfriends.
Oh, Arty, yeah, the worst kind. Oh, I'm unconventional. Look at me in my garret. Please.
And I wear a beret.
Oh, I wear a beret. Am I French? No, you're not.
They were our confessions this week. If you have one, you can send it via our website. You can send us an email, confessions@bbc.co.uk. More on Monday.
Thanks for listening to this BBC Radio 2 free download. Now, why not try more?
Jazz for me, I guess, is improvisation.
My pick of the best in rhythm and blues.
Music from Richard Thompson, Chris Wood and Pentangle, amongst many, many others.
All at the BBC Radio 2 website.